So we'll now move to the next paper, and this is about an encounter between a much earlier encounter between Europe and the Indian subcontinent, and it's a very well-known encounter. Alexander and Porus, and Professor Jorge Antonio will be offering some reflections on that. Professor Antonio.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to begin my presentation by thanking the Camões Institute and in particular its director, Dr. João Ribeiro, for kindly invite me to participate in this conference. In my presentation, I will show a Roman mosaic discovered in Alta do Chão, Portugal, in October 2007, which depicts an Indian king, more precisely King Porus, monarch of Paurava, who fought against Alexander the Great in the Battle of Hydaspes, which took place at the end of May 3026 BC. I will show that the links between Portugal and India are quite ancient, even predating Vasco da Gama's arrival in Calicut. This important mosaic was discovered in Alta do Chão, a small village located in Alentejo, about 170 kilometers northwest of Lisbon. Alta do Chão corresponds to the Roman city referred to in Antoninus Itinerário as a Beltério, located on one of the three Roman roads connecting Olisipo, Lisbon, to Emerita Augusta, now Mérida, in Spain. Archaeological excavations carried out in Beltério revealed a large aristocratic house, which was named House of Medusa, Casa da Medusa in Portuguese, and two public thermal buildings, each with a small necropolis dating from late antiquity associated with it. It should be noted that the house and the bath were decorated with mosaics with geometric and figurative motifs of great technical quality. As you can see, the mosaic of the Battle of Hydaspes found in the dining room, in the triclinium of the House of Medusa, is marked in red. So far, the atrium, several rooms, an infeum with a fountain in the center, and the peristyle garden where the dining room was built have been identified in the house. The dining room was paved with several mosaic panels decorated with geometric motifs and a figurative panel in the center depicting the most important scene from the Battle of Hydaspes. The dining room shown on the left side of the image had a rectangular floor plan and the internal area of 53 square meters. The mosaic of Porus and Alexander stands out in the center of the room, not only for its excellent state of preservation, but also for the number of human and divine figures, its exuberant polychromy, and the quality of its execution. The figure panel measured 9 square meters and was made with 112,000 tesserae, small cubic stones of limestone, marble, sandstone, and glass in white, yellow, pink, orange, red, green, and blue, measuring 0.4 and 1.4 centimeters. As for the Battle of Hydaspes, as we know, it took place at the end of May 3026 BC on the eastern bank of the Hydaspes River between Alexander III of Macedonia and Parmananshanda I of Paurava. According to Plutarch, it was a bloody battle that lasted more than 8 hours and resulted in a large number of human and animal casualties, as well as the loss of military equipment. It is mentioned by several classical authors, such as Diodorus Siculus, Curtius Rufus, Plutarch, Flavius Arrianus, and Pseudo Callisthenes. As Porus fought heroically until the end of the battle, Alexander wanted to meet him. He sent several emissaries to bring Porus to him, but without success. Finally sent Meroes, a longtime friend of the Indian king. It is precisely the historic meeting between Alexander and Porus, which took place on the eastern bank of the Hydaspes River, as reported by Arrian, that is depicted on the floor of the dining room of the house of Medusa in Alter do Chão, Portugal. This encounter, the most emblematic moment of the Hydaspes battle, represents not only the meeting between two great kings, but also the contact between the West and the East, between Europe and India. While the mosaic at Alter do Chão dates from the first half of the 4th century AD, the oldest known representation of the Battle of Hydaspes is the silver decadrachm from the 4th century BC. On the left, Alexander is depicted riding his horse Bucephalus and fighting Porus, who is riding an elephant. On the right, the victorious Macedonian king is crowned by Nick, holding Zeus' thunderbolt. For the bravery shown by the Indian king, Alexander gave him the name Porus, which means Lion of the Mountain. This name is particularly interesting because it was two meanings. Lion can be considered a epithet and mountain a geographical name. In ancient Greece and for many cultures, the lion symbolized power, strength, courage, majesty, royalty, and leadership, and was often associated with heroes such as Hercules. Alexander could have simply nicknamed the Indian king Lion, but by calling him Lion of the Mountain, he is saying that he was a king of the mountains and that his kingdom was in the mountains. When the two kings meet after the battle, Alexander asked Porus how he wanted to be treated. Porus replied, "Treat me like a king." Around Porus' mouth, there are tesserae that seems to simulate his response to Alexander. There are two other representations of the Battle of Hydaspes in Portugal. One on a tapestry in the Lamego Museum, made in the 16th century by Charles de Brun, and another in Ajuda National Palace in Lisbon, dating from the 18th century, a reinterpretation of Charles de Brun models. In the tapestry of the Lamego Museum, Porus is brought before Alexander by two warriors with some difficulty, perhaps an allusion to the Indian monarch's great stature, according to classical sources. In the Louvre Museum, there are several representations similar to the tapestry in the Lamego Museum, such as this painting by the same artist, Charles Le Brun. The Roman mosaic of the Battle of Issus, found in the House of the Faun in Pompeii, which depicts the encounter between Alexander and Darius III, is also considered to be a reproduction of a painting apparently by Philoxenus of Eritrea. One of the big questions about this mosaic is, why do we have a mosaic in Abelterium, Alter do Chão, on the western edge of the Roman Empire, depicting an Indian king, the King Porus, and the Macedonian king, Alexander, and the battle that took place several centuries before the dining room was built in the 4th century AD in the house of Medusa, several thousand kilometers away in India. There are two hypotheses, one simplistic and other more complex. Simplistic hypothesis, a mosaicist may have passed through Abelterium and offered his work to the owner of the house, and of the many designs he had, one was the Battle of Hydaspes. The complex hypothesis, well, the owner of the house, a military man, a local aristocrat, great admirer of Alexander and Hellenic culture, a Phil-Alexandroi, may have participated in the battle against the Sassanid Empire in the first half of the 4th century AD. He may have seen a mural depicting the Battle of Hydaspes in a noble house or in a palace in the territory of the former Seleucid Empire, and decided to reproduce it on the floor of his dining room in Belterium. Another reason that leads me to believe that this mosaic is a copy of a painting, possibly from the Hellenistic period, are the errors in its execution and iconography. For the errors in the execution, I would like to highlight the fact that the lower part of the spear of the Indian soldiers on the far right has not been represented. The Frisian warrior on the far left and the Indian warrior on the far right are partially cut off. Part of their bodies is outside the mosaic. The third leg on the right does not belong to any of the Indian warriors, because the leg of the warriors on the right is not represented. The tip of Porus, the spear, is inverted. It should be at the opposite end. Regarding iconography errors, well, the altar of the Chão mosaic is a Romanized version of the Battle of Hydaspes. There was probably a Greek word around Porus' mouth in the original painting, possibly king, the word Greek basileus. Probably, well, the pictor imaginaries don't know, sorry, probably the pictor imaginaries would not have know the Greek or Hellenistic iconography. The mosaic has several iconography elements associated with India. The most important, of course, is Porus. Porus stands before Alexander half reclining with his arms outstretched. Like Alexander, he wears a helmet and armor, and his sword, spear, and shield are on the ground. Strabo mentioned that the kingdom of Porus, the kingdom of Paurava, lay between the rivers Hydaspes, Shelum, and Assassins, Shainab, a vast and productive region with almost 300 cities. In the upper right corner of the mosaic, 3 soldiers are depicted who, despite carrying Greek weapons, are Indian, and they are part of Alexander's army. They wear closed helmets with plumes on top, spears on the circular shields, and the soldiers in the center, with his arm extended in front of the shield held by Alexander, is Meroes, who was charged by the Macedonian king with bringing Porus to his presence, and is believed to have been the translator for the 2 monarchs. In the lower left corner of the mosaic, the god of the Hydaspes river, the deification of the river, near which the battle between Porus and Alexander took place. He holds a palm tree in his left hand as an Asian deity, and under his right hand and arm is a cantorus pouring water. While the cantorus represents the source of the river, the water flowing from it represents the riverbed. At the main entrance to the dining room, Dionysius Tirsus, the weapon of the god of wine, was depicted to identify the room as a dining room. Dionysius, besides being the god of wine, was also the god of civilization and long journeys, which is why he went to India and conquered the Indians. Alexander not only conquered India and the Indians, but also surpassed the god, reaching the Ispasis, Beas River. As we can see, the mosaic in the Medusa's house has a deep connection with India through the representation of King Porus, Indian warriors, the god of the Hydaspes River, and the god Dionysius, and also, in a way, through the representation of the god Oceanus. Why? Well, the mosaic depicts various geographic elements. The Gorgon Medusa. Medusa is associated with the far west, where she lived with her sisters, the Gorgon Steno and Euriel. She is depicted in the mosaic of the House of Medusa, located in the Pars Occidentalis of the Roman Empire. Hydaspes, the river Hydaspes represents the east, the site of the battle in the eastern part of the Macedonian Empire. Also, the Macedonian and Roman empires were not contemporaneous. The connection between these two empires is virtually made through the god Oceanus, the personification of the waters that surrounded the world, with Alexander and Porus as central protagonists. It was precisely across the ocean, that immense body of water, that Vasco da Gama traveled to reach Calicut at the end of the 6th century, connecting Europe to Asia and Portugal to India. But in reality, the first connection between what is now Portuguese territory and India was made in Roman times, in the 4th century AD, by an inhabitant of Belterium, present-day Alta do Chão, more than 1,000 years before Vasco da Gama reached Calicut. In other words, we can say that the connection between Portugal and India, between Alta do Chão and Kangra, is around 1,700 years old, thanks to the representation of King Porus in the mosaic of the House of Medusa. The representation of Alexander-Porus in the mosaic places Alta do Chão or Portugal between Greece and India, or Kangra. For this reason, the Greek ambassador Vasilissis Papadopoulos visited the House of Medusa in April this year, and the Indian ambassador Puneet Kundal in July. Recognizing the importance of this mosaic, the Alta do Chão Municipal Council placed a roof over the House of Medusa to protect the archaeological remains found there. Recognizing the importance of this mosaic, the Alta do Chão Municipal Council placed this roof, 3,000 square meters roof, as a unique feature of illuminating the Roman house and at night, making it possible to hold dramatized guided tours and historical reenactments during a Roman festival organized by the city council. In addition to this coverage, a small temporary interpretation center for the House of Medusa was set up at Casa do Alum, where some archaeological materials and in a enlarged image of the mosaic of Alexander-Porus are on display. It should be noted that the Alta do Chão Municipal Council, recognizing the enormous importance of the mosaic, has initiated contacts with the Portuguese Ministry of Culture to classify the mosaic as a national monument, the most important classification of Portuguese heritage. Considering the enormous health of Roman historical and archaeological heritage in the municipality of Alta do Chão, the City Council will build an interpretation center of the Roman presence in the municipality, next to the House of Medusa. The project is evaluated at 5 million and will be financed by the European community. Around 50% of the museum project will be dedicated to this mosaic, more specifically to the Battle of Hydaspes, the river Hydaspes and the god of river Hydaspes, to Macedonian and Indian weaponry, to Alexander and the Macedonian royal family and his divine family, since he was the son of Zeus and Olympias of Epirus, and to Parmanchanda I, the King Porus, and the Katoch dynasty. The Amphoret of Antiquities of Ematia, part of the Greek Ministry of Culture and Tourism, requested an image of the mosaic of Porus and Alexander from the Alta do Chão Municipal Council to include in the virtual museum of Alexander the Great, From My Guide to the World, a website that has been active since the end of June of this year. This mosaic is particularly relevant to the connection between Portugal and India because the lineage of King Porus, the Katoch dynasty, continues to this day. The current king is Avishwarya Chand Katoch, whom I had the pleasure of meeting personally last summer in Dharamshala. He has his official residence in Clouds and Villa in Dharamshala, Himachal Pradesh, near the Himalayas. In fact, these mosaics establish a very special, very particular connection between Alter do Chão and Kangra, capable of establishing a cultural agreement that I believe it's very important, very beneficial for Portugal and India, and in particular for two localities. To conclude, we do indeed have this important and unique connection between our countries, a connection that predates Vasco da Gama arrival in Calicut in the 16th century, that predates the foundation of Portugal in the 12th century, that dates back to the Roman times. There are 700 years of historical ties between Portugal, Greece, and India that must be continued. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Jorge Antonio. The story of the encounter between Alexander and Porus is very well known, at least in India, and some historians have at times wondered whether or not the historical significance of this confrontation has not been exaggerated. But as the example of this mosaic shows that the memories of this encounter remain very much part of European artistic traditions for a long time, and even in distant Portugal. So this paper is open for discussion. There are questions or comments.
Built the house of Medusa. Sorry. My name is Ashish Mitra. It is very interesting about this Kakash connection because the dominant forces of the Indian Army today, they take the lineage from Kangra and their particular area. So I didn't know it goes that far back. So that's a revelation. But the question I have is that who built this house of Medusa and why? And why did they bring in this kind of mosaics there?
When?
Sorry?
And when? Time?
And when, yes.
Time is fourth century?
No,
Eh?
this history of first century, but the building, this mosaic.
Yeah.
Answer it.
So we will answer.
Can you go the Baron?
I think so. António, can you hear me?
Eu não consegui ouvir totalmente a questão.
António, estão a perguntar quando foi quem construiu o mosaico. O que é que tu podes dizer sobre isso?
Bem, a casa da...
English.
Well, the House of Medusa was built in the second half of the 3rd century. And the mosaic was built inside the peristyle garden in the first half of the 4th century.
Is it?
In the Roman times, of course. The House of Medusa is an aristocratic house, a Roman house.
And what can you say about the owner? O que é que consegues dizer sobre o dono do mosaico?
Well, I think the owner is a military man. I can say, an intellectual, a rich man. Probably he went to Roman province of Syria and saw a wall painting with the Battle of Hydaspes depicted, and decided to reproduce this battle in his house, in his dining room, in his house in the Belterium, present-day Alter do Chão. I can say more about this, the owner. Probably a military man, a local aristocratic.
Yeah.
Thank you for that fascinating presentation, Professor. I take your permission to bring another perspective onto this and talk about it as a text which travels. You know, I come from translation studies, and this is the time and space of the text. And that makes it fascinating for me. And I would like to this. This has happened across objects of translation, across the board. And this is fascinating because I've seen a mosaic of Alexander. So, ideas of Russia, but this one is a new one. So, response and cultural on to the contemporary by the presence of the Indian ambassador site in 2025. It's absolutely fascinating us traveling with the text. So translation and cultural studies. Thank you.
João, eu não consegui ouvir a pergunta.
Ok.
Com muitos cortes, eu não consigo ouvir.
Ok.
Sentido.
António, a nossa participante aqui no seminário, nesta conferência, diz que vem da área dos estudos de tradução e diz que vê este mosaico como uma tradução de um texto. De um texto que viajou e que estabeleceu pontes entre culturas, não é? E também pontes interculturais. E então ela pede o teu comentário a isto, não é? Ela diz que ela não vem da área da história, vem da área das letras e dos estudos de tradução e gostava de ter a tua reação em relação a isto, do mosaico ser uma transposição de um texto, de uma memória cultural. Ok?
Well,
It is a very intriguing question, isn't it? I think it is very...
Well, I have done a deep research work because my PhD thesis is about this mosaic, Alexander is depicted in this mosaic as he is mentioned in the classical sources, and I don't have this battle is documented. This interpretation is supported by the classical sources. I don't have any more information so far.
Yes, but the depiction of the soldiers, the depiction of the king, the depiction of Alexander, it has historical. It has an
it's factual,
right?
historical. This meeting is historical. We have depicted in the mosaic 3 deities or 4, but this meeting is factual, historical. This is the most important moment of Hidaspa's battle. This is the encounter between Europe and Asia, between 2 great kings, and they are mentioned in the classical sources. It is very important because I can understand better the lower imperial aristocracy in the ancient Roman province of Lusitania. Part of this, the Roman province of Lusitania is now, Portugal. This is this mosaic is the basis of my PhD thesis. So I am doing a very deep working research.
Okay, but I do have another question.
I think Professor
Yes.
Alam has a
Okay, you too.
question,
Okay, so
comment.
It's not a question, it's just suggestion. Can you show this mosaic again? You see, what fascinated me was that the reflection of the horseman. Today I'm obsessed with horse.
Sorry?
The feet are dangling, they're not fixed on an instrument. So that shows that there is total absence of stirrups. And that supports, that indicates what White has to say. That came very late in the 7th, 8th century, not before that. Secondly, in India, kind of stirrups, that was the beginning of stirrup as such. That has been dated from 1st century AD. That kind of thing is also not there. So obviously these are Europeans, so they are not familiar. And European guide is shown. So that is very interesting actually. So this is historical. I would suggest that. Very truthfully done. Thank you very much for enlightening us.
Thank you.
So, yeah. I think this would be the last question.
This question, but I just wanted to add to what you said, just comment on how the point about the translation of text through cultures and through space. What I just wanted to say was, with Greco-Roman culture and through Italian museums and cities and sites, would have encountered hundreds and thousands of instances where there are marble copies of the Greek bronze originals, right? And famous artists and masters who were then replicated. And so you're mostly restricting yourself between the Greek peninsula on the one hand and the Italian peninsula on the other, and some of the major Roman provinces in Europe. But here, I think we have an expansion of that cultural exchange and artistic exchange where you're shifting the boundaries on both ends from an Asiatic world bordering the Mediterranean and the Levant, wherein there might be an earlier original depicting a Greek/Macedonian/Indian encounter, which is then taken back not to Italy, but rather all the way down to Portugal, and then replicated in later Roman times, very close to the collapse of the empire itself. And so I think it kind of broadens our, especially for someone like me who wasn't aware of this mosaic and who's just flabbergasted by how incredible this is, it broadens all our contours or mental contours of how works of art from a Greek antiquity were then being admired and replicated in a later, late ancient Roman antiquity, and kind of crossing all these trans-regional boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a very valuable comment. So we'll conclude for
yes.
today, and I'll hand you over to.
Okay, so thank you
Dr.
very much
Ribeiro.
for this very interesting session.